Hello and welcome to the Butterfly Effect, a show about becoming. In today's episode, we meet Maida Maya Salkanović, a journalist, human rights activist, and upstander against misinformation and deepfakes. Maya, being a journalist, she is in the business of telling stories, but she always does it with enormous passion and energy. She also doesn't shun herself from telling most difficult stories. After all, she is a survivor of Bosnia genocide. Today, she will share with us her take on the way we communicate in the digital era, but also will share with us her tips on recalibrating your purpose as you move forward. Here is Maya's story. Maya, why are you?
Starting strong, I see, Łukasz. The way you're used to, but I think it's a question that, on one hand, we spend our lifetime trying to answer, and on the other hand, it might be very simple. I think sometimes I also oscillate between the way I think about it, and sometimes I struggle a little bit. On one hand, as I said, it could be very simple. It's just that we are mammals, we are born, we live, and we die, and then we fertilize other life forms. And I think that's sort of a way to see that could be very liberating, actually. But it also can be very empty in a way. But I think like a lot of people might think about it that way, or maybe not even think about it, just live it that way. On the other hand, I feel like we struggle a lot as human beings with that exact same question. I mean, hundreds and thousands and God knows how many pages have been written about this exact question. But when I think about it, I mean, I am someone who's very driven, and who's very intrinsically driven. So I, uh, I always felt basically that sense of purpose. And at some, at some point, I think like you get into a crisis, and I feel like I think one of those times is now, those sorts of periods, because first of all, when you're younger, you have all of these ideals that guide you, and you see the world the way you want to see it, and you think, oh, this is how things work, and if it's not, I will make it be so. When you get a little bit older, when you get out there in the real world, you see that things are not that simple, and it can be very sobering experience. One of my first jobs was as a journalist in Bosnia, and I was doing investigative journalism, and I faced a lot of corruption, a lot of negativity, and I think that was one of the kind of points where my world that I created in my head started to crumble, because I saw the reality and I saw what my effect could be on it, and I saw that it's not as much as we like to think when we first get out of college, or when we're just these really young people with no life experience, in essence. But I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think in the recent period, that's also been something that a lot of people have been struggling with, because the world order that emerged, the geopolitical world order that emerged after World War II, is going through a lot of changes right now. I would not say that it's completed its transformation, but it's very different from what we are used to. And I know that a lot of people have started questioning their ideals. They basically, I would get people come to me and say, what's the point? Basically, we are taught that if we do things a certain way, rewards will follow, or basically, you will be able to exist in this sort of world. But I feel that recently, that sort of sense of stability has just been very elusive for a lot of people. And I think, to go back from all of that, to me personally, I'm talking about all of this because it does affect me. I am someone who, well, I mentioned who is very intrinsically motivated, but also I notice a lot what's going on around me, obviously. And I think I've been struggling a bit with that exact question. Why am I? Why do I get out of bed in the morning? What's my purpose? And I feel like I've been doing a lot of motions, right? Some things that I've learned, routines, that don't really that it stopped exciting me at some point, and it stopped being my sense of why. So I've been working on that a lot. I've been trying to go back to some old things that made me alive when I was younger. And I've also been trying to discover new things. And in the process, I've basically learned that, yes, maybe the world that we wanted does not exist, but that does not stop any one of us to still try and create it and to try and create beauty out of nothing. I feel like that's basically my sense of why is I want to contribute to society. I want to make people's lives better, and I want to create something beautiful.
And I know you do create amazing things out there, but a little bit to go deeper into how the things been changing and shifting over those years. If you could name a couple of ideals or thoughts or perspectives you had back then when maybe when we met each other in New Mexico at our high school or earlier or after that were cross-checked with the reality.
I would say one of the sort of maybe not ideals but also principles, something that I've been taught that that's how the world works, is that things are merit based. Basically, if you put in an effort, if you create something meaningful, something worthwhile, it will come to top, it will be noticeable. And that's something that I kept with me for quite a long time. And then later on in the world, I learned that there are so many different factors, so many, and that's, I think like that's connected quite a bit with the sense of justice. And you feel like, okay, if this person does this, then they deserve this. And you learn that's not exactly how things work. Not in the society, not just generally in life. I mean, a lot of times, like sometimes when we are faced with tragedies, we wonder why this or why me? Why has this happened to me? And at some point, I realized that a lot of things are random and things happen that do not mean that you did something good or bad. It's just the way it is. And it doesn't have, it's not connected with your sense of worth. So, that would be one of them. Other things, I mean, it's hard to say, oh, I believed people are good in their essence. That's not it. I was always, you know, uh, I was always just wondering about the human nature, and there are a lot of philosophical discussions and uh, cultural contexts differ, but I would, yeah, I think like that's something that I actually probably still believe, and I still trust people. I might end up seeming naive in some situations, but I'd much rather be naive than cause harm, if that makes sense.
And preventing harm, as I think what we both agree should be one of our big goals. But I want to also learn about the ways you were shaped into this person who thinks that way, that you have this sense of commitment to the people around you and the planet. What do you think are the places, interactions, ideas that shape you the most into who you are?
I would have to think a lot about this. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is family. I think that's where a lot of these things come from. I think my family also has this very strong sense of justice and do no harm. And sometimes I know that was not exactly like some of our values were not the same as the values of even our neighborhood, maybe, or the society, but I think like I got that from them. And I'm also very grateful for my family because I know that they are there for me no matter what. There's that sense of unconditional love, I feel. And I only realized that later on in life. I know that, we might disagree, we might not hold same political beliefs, not have same life paths, but if something happens, even if it's something that's completely out of their world, my family will be there for me. So I think that's one thing. I think another one would definitely be New Mexico, right? And the United World College, where it was a very crazy place, as you you are very well aware of, where there was a lot of children, basically, a lot of young people from all over the world, from very different cultures, very different customs, who came together tied with this idea, this ideal, basically, to improve the world, right? Even though I think at some point you learn that some people are not there for that reason. And later on, I was in similar contexts when you learn people try to use those contexts for personal gain. But I would say that most people who were there were pretty idealistic, and we were doing, now that I look back at it, we were doing some crazy things. Basically, we didn't really have a lot of free time. We tried to learn, we tried to soak up knowledge as much as we can. We tried to put out different sorts of performances, events, panels, like to learn and to share that knowledge. And I have to say, you are one of the people who shaped me as well. Because it seems like, I mean, I am cynical quite a bit at some point, but I can almost always count that Lucas is there and that he is someone who will believe, who will be there, whose faith is strong, and who is looking forward. So that's something that, I mean, I'm very glad I'm very grateful for our friendship. And I think those sorts of people are just something that basically motivates me, and that happens a lot when I deal with UWC people, and even if they are just in school right now, I did workshops with them, I did some programs, etc. And I always get re-energized, I would say, because you see, okay, these are these people, they might be young, but they are doing amazing things and they see the world the way I see it. And I feel like that's something that I need to keep doing. Meeting these sorts of people, it doesn't have to be obviously UWC. There are so many people out there who have that similar life philosophy, and I feel like that's something that has shaped me. I've always been trying to find friends and colleagues who are similar, someone who I can trust, someone who I can work with, someone who I can love, because I feel like it's very important to love our friends. And I know that it might not be super popular in today's world. I know we think about, business, profit, etc., outcomes, but I really, I'm kind of people first. So when we are working on something, I want everybody to feel good, and I want us all to put all of our energy in it. And then I think like outcomes are almost guaranteed. So that's another thing that shaped me. I would say my college, Occidental College. Once again, these are things that I realized years later, but I feel it's shaped me quite a bit because there was dialogue there. I mean, it was a super liberal school. There was a lot of similarities, I would say, among people who went there. But still, when there were disagreements, they were dealt with in a civilized way, in a way that respected other people's differences. Um, and I feel like there were a lot of strong female role models there. So I've learned to appreciate that, especially once you leave that sort of environment and you experience the so-called real world, then you learn how to appreciate that. I can go on and on, but I'll just mention maybe a few more things. One of them is my master's program, ERMA, or the European Regional Masters in Democracy and Human Rights. That's done together with University of Sarajevo and University of Bologna, and I feel like that shaped me quite a bit because not just of the things that I've learned, but also because of the people surrounding me, and people that I work with, also these days. And yeah, I think like that's something that was one of the defining forces. And I think obviously the places where I work, as I said, I always try to find environments that fit, and a lot of times I'm successful at it.
I also have to mention how transformative and formative our friendship has been for all these years. And if you don't feel comfortable with the next question, we don't need to open those doors. But I remember when we spent our high school time together, you mentioned also how the experience of Bosnian genocide has impacted the way you see the world and you see the people. If you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about that, that would be great. But if not, it's also totally fine.
Of course, I'm happy to talk about it. Um, it's hard to talk about it, right? Because I was a very young child. The war ended in 1995. I was four then. And it's easy to say maybe like, oh, you don't remember everything. And that's true. I only have a few memories of that time. But I feel like when you are thrust into that sort of environment, you get, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a full memory. It is something that forms you. It is something that's even I would say on the physical level, those are the things that shape you. And I feel like maybe the way it works on such young children, once again, everybody's resilience factors are different, and it differs very much where you grew up. In Bosnia, I grew up in Gračanica, which was not under as much attack as, for example, Sarajevo, which was besieged. So it's different, but I think like it gave me this sort of feeling, and I do think yes, people are good. We can I can trust them. I do see that I'm still like that, but you do get this sort of feeling that, oh, you're out there in the world and someone is hunting you from the very moment you were born, in my case, pretty much almost. And you get that feeling of insecurity. You get the trauma. Once again, it doesn't have to be a fully formed memory. It could be the fear that you get. And I do see that in myself, in a lot of other people who grew up in similar conditions. And you're very sensitive to your environment. I developed PTSD from it, even though once again that's usually not connected with such an age. But it is something that shapes you in the way you see the world. And I dealt with a lot of really strange things that, I mean, psychology, as I'm saying, in the society, you don't see people being affected that much, and you don't talk about it because there's this expectation of stoicism. Everybody's been through it, so just shut up and deal with it. But I like talking about it. I like being vulnerable about it because I feel like I managed to build my strength quite a bit going through all of these processes of dealing with, okay, how has this affected me? This has been a super formative experience in my life. And I'm very surprised that I didn't think of that. But yeah, how am I dealing with that? I had things like survivor's guilt. I had things like, a lot of people with this sort of trauma don't think they will live long, don't think they will reach these developmental milestones such as marriage, children, similar things. And I did face all of that. I felt that I needed a lot of time to work through my trauma. And, I didn't think I would live past 30. And the thing is, that's all about the war, right? But then the post-war reality can also shape you in those sort of ways. It was the time, you can imagine the society is destroyed, and you get things like introduction of the rule of law into the society. I remember that being like very vividly some of those things that I only managed to put in context later on. But yes, being from Bosnia has shaped me, and even in UWC, which is supposed to be a place with people, young, idealistic, positive people, I've faced a lot of adversity, I would say. Some people hated my country, so they hated me. Some people even threatened me. And some people made fun of genocide. One person had a presentation telling everybody that my nation doesn't exist, that I don't exist, basically. So it was a lot of, and I was there. I was 16. I was someone who, once again, my parents, the way I was brought up, they weren't telling me, oh, it's this person's fault or these people's fault. I did not have that. And I also did not have context and, or convictions. When you have convictions, even if they're not factually based on facts, basically, you are able to stand against that sort of thing and fight. But I basically came out there as like this very naive, innocent child that had to deal with all of that, that had to learn on my own. All of these historical facts, that had to learn how to defend myself, and that had to build resilience from all of that. So, yeah.
I remember from those times, I loved hearing your stories because you always tell them with passion, but also a very engaging way of people can visualize things. And no surprise, you become a journalist because you can really well communicate. But I want to grasp the sense of your recipe on how you communicate with people, how you grab their attention in the time when attention span is limited through our experiences from social media and dopamine boosts.
Well, I try. I think what's really important is authenticity. And we live in the time when everything is fake. We are used to seeing these very rehearsed things on social media, which, let's face it, internet has become our life for a lot of people. Our reality is mediatized. Everything is like we are basically learned. We are basically we are used to seeing the sort of rehearsed reality, if I can call it that way. And I feel like authenticity is something that's most important. I'm mentoring several teams of young people, and some of them do communications. And I tell them that what the most important thing when communicating is to have something to communicate. That's the basis where you build the rest. So you do have to have something that people will think is important. And then the way you say it, for me, it's very important to be authentic. And I do see that. I mean, my communication is not perfect. I'm taking lessons on pronunciation and gestures and things like that because I'm a little bit too authentic in that. But I do see that people, like if I'm speaking at a conference, people do leave their phones and maybe like lean forward. And I think it's because I'm trying to connect. I'm not trying to present myself basically, but I'm trying to give them something that's relevant to them and important to them. And I think that's basically a very simple tenet that I go by.
Let's circle back to you. We mentioned a lot the impact of childhood and youth on the way you were formed and your purpose. But I'm wondering about today's life of you as a journalist, as a storyteller. Are there any stories that you encounter that reinforce the purpose in you in a way? Okay, after this conversation, I know why I'm a journalist and I want to keep doing that.
I think it's after every conversation with people because I am doing my PhD in media and communications right now, and I've learned that a lot of methods, a lot of research methods are just very boring to me. So I am kind of switching to interviews because I just really love this. It's just that I feel like to me, that's what journalism is. What we are doing right now with digital journalism a lot is here is a set of questions. I'm sending them to you. Can you prepare an answer and just send it back to me? That's not exactly, I mean, it's the last resort. It's what we do. Or, we pick up the phone, which is better, but still not the same. Conversation face to face, I feel like that's what excites me. And that's when I learn about people. And I feel like anything that helps me learn about people, that helps me learn something new, those are the sorts of conversations that I really appreciate. And then the other thing is I feel something that will help, something that helps change things for people. So I remember this was not journalism related. It was my master thesis, but I was part of it was about gender sensitive language, its importance, and how well people are accepting it. So I had an interview with a journalist in Belgrade, and she was this very cool lady, very she was like a TV journalist. She was well known. So I was speaking to her, and she said, "No, no, no, there's no need for gender sensitive language." And I don't know if I'll be able to, tell the story in English, but well, I probably won't. But she was saying, "No, no, no. My doctor is Doctor So and so, and she was a woman, but she was using." A male form, which in Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian is you do have very distinct forms. And she was saying like, oh, she earned her diploma. I respect her. There's no reason to call her anything other than doctor instead of in Bosnian doktorica or in Serbian doktorka. And then I told her, okay, but it's okay for you to say cleaning lady. And in Bosnian, there's a difference, right? It's like čistač, čistačica. And then she looked at me and she was like, oh, wow, yeah, Madame Poo-Poo, right? And there's no Mr. Poo-Poo. And she was referring to the people who are basically charging when you enter toilets. And then she made this realization right there on the spot. So that was very interesting to me. And I've done that over the course of like you do see sometimes that change in people right away. But other times you get to advocate for people.
I also want to go back to what you said earlier about you being in a moment of life when you're redefining your sense of purpose and you're calibrating different things of where you are and where you're heading next. If you could tell us a little bit more about what are the principles that guide you through that process, how are you doing that, and what do you think, what you predict will be the outcome? What will be the next path for you to take?
Um, in the words of Atul Fagard, I hope I'm not butchering his name. I oscillate between hope and despair, and I feel like that's something that I keep doing basically, and I feel like that's everybody who is sort of an idealist does, and we end up being very cynical, because people who are not idealistic, they don't really have a reason to be cynical because they don't have this ideal that's constantly not being met by definition, and it's not going to be met. But I feel like, there's been a lot of changes in my life. I moved around a lot. I moved around quite a bit. Few continents, several different countries, so and quite a few US states. So there's I feel like moving is sort of an experience that gives you it makes you question yourself, right? Because you're taken away from your routines, from your roots when you first move, from anything that's familiar, and you need to ask yourself, oh, in this environment, who am I? How do I rebuild myself? So after some time, I started learning, okay, everywhere I go, I need to have some sort of a physical activity. It can be martial arts, it can be dancing, it has, like, I have to have that sort of thing. I have to have cafes that I like to go to. I have to have these sorts of people. I have to have these sorts of places. So these are the sorts of things that you learn about yourself with time, and I feel like you can replicate them wherever you are, kind of like put them in a different context. But I feel like also with the big changes in the world, I feel like a lot of people are just thinking, okay, as I mentioned in the beginning, what we were taught just does not go anymore. And it took me some time to realize, okay, in this sort of world, that is definitely not what I wanted. What can I do? And then one of the things that I did is I went back to old habits. Like I loved reading a lot, and at some point I couldn't even read. And then I realized, oh, I'm reading books that are basically textbooks. I mean, they were not for any academic courses or anything, but it wasn't fiction, and it doesn't have to be fiction, but I love reading biographies, autobiographies, etc. But it does have to be something that's good. And that's also very hard to find something that I connect with. So, I started trying to find these authors. I started that I can connect with. I started to try and find these people. And I think that's another challenge as you're growing up, right? All of the people that you consider your role models, your idols, you grow up and you learn, oh, these people had no idea what they're doing either. So basically, it was very hard to find someone, to find again, right? To find new, I wouldn't say role models, but people who would excite me. That's what I'm after, I feel. And then I went back to an old habit of mine. Like I've been writing songs for over 20 years. I started in elementary school. A music teacher asked us to compose something. So I actually did, and she really liked it. So I think like I kept doing that. And my challenge is I'm musically illiterate. I but what I do is I write the words, I have the melody somewhere in my head, and at some point I started recording it in IT classes in Bosnia. We had to learn these programs for radio, like how to edit radio shows, etc. So I started also trying to use them for my songs, and that's what I did. And then later on with our friend Tina in New Mexico, I actually recorded a demo. She was playing the piano and I was singing. I know we were very spoiled. We had a recording studio which I didn't use enough, but that sort of thing kind of stopped. At some point, I also stopped writing anything that's fiction, anything that's more introspective, anything that's not work, basically. And I feel like those are the moments when you're not very much in touch with yourself. I couldn't write because I had nothing to say. I did not know who am I at the moment, what am I doing at the moment, and that recently came back. So I am writing songs again. And AI actually has helped me quite a bit with that because I'm making demos with AI. Once again, text is mine, music is my melody is mine, but I use it to sort of like get the sort of feeling that I want. I use it to get a demo. And that's a sort of a new stage in my career. I'm hoping I'm trying to create these connections. I'm trying to break into this sort of world, but that's something that's just been making me very happy. And I, s- I said it earlier, if you can't find beauty around yourself, create it. And I feel like this is what I'm doing with my music. Like, and also, yeah, I was at the point where there was no music I wanted to listen. There was not, everything's familiar to you. You kind of like stop getting into this habit of trying to find new things, of trying to, and even if you want to, you don't know where to start because YouTube is a vast land of content, but what am I going to do? Stuff that I like, I just type in stuff that I like. Maybe with ChatGPT we will soon be able to do that as well. But I started being like, okay, if I can't find these things, how about I create them? And that's just something that I've been trying to do.
You dropped the I word, so I'm gonna, for the last question, ask you, how do you keep the sense of idealism in your life?
I just think that I can't do any other way. It's just there's no other way. This is who I am. And there have been times where I'm just very much dissatisfied with the world around me. But then I feel like it's the people, right? I meet other people and I see them do beautiful things. And whenever, the opposite happens, I get very disappointed. But I don't lose my faith. I don't lose my hope in humanity. I see something that's just, and once again, it is connected with the way I grew up. Because in these sorts of conditions, it's very hard not to, at some point at least, lose faith in humanity. You see the worst things that people are ready to do to one another. So I wouldn't say that, I am an idealist in a way that I'm naive. No, I know what people are. I know what they are capable of, and I know that under the right circumstances or wrong circumstances, they will do it. But I also know that there's beauty. I also know that we can all work on trying to create it and trying to also help others. And I feel like that's something that, I can work on definitely more. But that's just something that if you are, and that's also something that I learned at some point, like if I am feeling very much like bad about the world about around me, if I'm feeling down, how about I do something good for someone else with no expectations, with no reason, but every single time I do that, I do feel better. So that's just something that, I've been thinking about, and I've been trying to volunteer, trying to speak to different sorts of people, trying to once again just create beauty in the world. And I feel like I can one thing that I know, I can count on is myself. So that's why I'm trying to do it myself. But it's also just very nice to see other people doing it. And that's where I get my hope from.
Thank you so much, Maya, for sharing with us this invitation to create the beauty in the world. Because, as you say, beauty enthuses the sense of purpose and idealism. And I hope that that will be our new direction to walk this year and every year. Thank you so much for your time and this conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Lukasz. It's always really nice to see what you are doing because, once again, it gives me hope. It makes me happy. So thank you.
Thanks so much.